Saving Grace, a Katie Connell, Texas to Caribbean romantic mystery, and first in the What Doesn't Kill You Super Series. Written by Pamela Fagan Hutchins, copyright 2012. Performed for you by Pamela Fagan Hutchins, copyright 2020. Chapter 1. The Eldorado, Shreveport, Louisiana, March 14th, 2012. Last year sucked, and this one was already worse. Last year, when my parents died in an accident on their Caribbean vacation, I'd been working too hard to listen to my instincts, which were screaming bullshit, so loud I almost went deaf in my third ear. I was preparing for the biggest case of my career, so I sort of had an excuse that worked for me as long as I showed up for happy hour. But the truth was, I was obsessed with the private investigator assigned to my case. Nick. Almost divorced Nick. My new coworker, Nick, who sometimes sent out vibes that he wanted to rip my Ann Taylor blouse off with his teeth when he wasn't busy ignoring me. But things had changed. I'd just gotten the verdict back in my mega trial, the Burnside wrongful termination case. My firm rarely took plaintiff cases, so I'd taken a big risk with this one and won Mr. Burnside $3 million, of which the firm got a third. That was the total opposite of suck. After my coup at the Dallas courthouse, my paralegal Emily and I headed straight down I-20 to the hotel where our firm was on retreat in Shreveport, Louisiana. Shreveport is not on the top 10 list for most company getaways, but our senior partner fancied himself a poker player and loved Cajun food, jazz, and riverboat casinos. The retreat was a great excuse for Gino to indulge in a little Texas Hold'em between team building and sensitivity sessions and still come off looking like a hell of a guy. But it meant a 3.5-hour drive each way. This wasn't a problem for Emily and me. We bridged both the paralegal to attorney gap and the coworker to friend gap with ease, largely because neither of us did Dallas fancy very well. Or at all. Emily and I hustled inside for a check-in at the Eldorado. "Do you want a map of the ghost tours?" the front desk clerk asked us, her polyglot Texan, Cajun, Southern accent making tours sound like tours. "Why, thank you kindly, but no thanks," Emily drawled. In the 10 years since she'd left, she still hadn't shaken Amarilla from her voice or given up barrel racing horses. I didn't believe in hocus pocus either, but I wasn't a fan of casinos, which reeked of cigarette smoke and desperation. "Do y'all have karaoke or anything else but casinos on site?" "Yes, ma'am, we have a rooftop bar with karaoke, pool tables, and that kind of thing." The girl swiped at her bangs, then swung her head to put them back in the same place they'd been. "That sounds more like it," I said to Emily. "Karaoke," she said. "Again." She rolled her eyes. "Only if we can do tradesies halfway. I want to play blackjack." After we deposited our bags in our rooms and freshened up, talking to each other the whole time on our cell phones while we were apart, we joined our group. All of our coworkers broke into applause as we entered the conference room. News of our victory had preceded us. We curtsied, and I used both arms to do a Vanna White toward Emily. She returned the favor. "Where's Nick?" I called out. "Come on up here." Nick had left the courtroom when the jury went out to deliberate, so he'd beaten us here. He stood up from a table on the far side of the room, but didn't join us in front. I gave him a long-distance Vanna White anyway. The applause died down, and some of my partners motioned for me to sit with them at a table near the entrance. I joined them, and we all got to work writing a mission statement for the firm for the next 15 minutes. Emily and I had arrived just in time for the first day's sessions to end. When we broke, the group stampeded from the hotel to the docked barge that housed the casino. In Louisiana, gambling is only legal on the water or on tribal land. On impulse, I walked to the elevator instead of the casino. Just before the doors closed, a hand jammed between them and they bounced apart, and I found myself headed up to the hotel rooms with none other than Nick Kovacs. "So, Helen, you're not a gambler either," he said as the elevator doors closed. My stomach flipped. Cheesy, yes, but when he was in a good mood, Nick called me Helen, as in Helen of Troy. I had promised to meet Emily for early blackjack before late karaoke, but he didn't need to know that. "I have the luck of the Irish," I said. "Gambling is dangerous for me." He responded with dead silence. Each of us looked up, down, sideways, and anywhere but at each other, which was hard since the elevator was mirrored above a gold handrail and wood paneling. There was a wee bit of tension in the air. "I heard there's a pool table at the hotel bar, though, and I'd be up for that," I offered, throwing myself headlong into the void and holding my breath on the way down. Dead silence again. Long dead silence. The ground was going to hurt when I hit it. Without making eye contact, Nick said, "Okay, I'll meet you there in a few minutes." Did he really say he'd meet me there? Just the two of us? Out together? Oh my God, Katie, what have you done? The elevator doors dinged, and we headed in opposite directions to our rooms. It was too late to back out now. I moved in a daze, hyperventilating, pit sweating, heart pounding. My outfit was all wrong, so I ditched the Ann Taylor for some jeans, a structured white blouse, and, yes, I admit it, a multicolored Jessica Simpson handbag and her coordinating orange platform sandals. White works well against my long, wavy red hair, which I unclipped and finger-combed over my shoulders. Not very attorney-like, but that was the point. Besides, I didn't even like being an attorney, so why would I want to look like one now? Normally, I am Katie clean, but I settled on a quick brush of my teeth, a French shower, and lipstick. I considered calling Emily to tell her I was no-showing, but I knew she would understand when I explained later. I race-walked to the elevators and cursed them as they stopped on every other floor before the rooftop grotto. Ding! Finally. I stopped to catch my breath. I counted to 10, took one last gulp for courage, and stepped under the dim lights above the stone-topped bar. I stood near a man whose masculinity I could feel pulsing from several feet away. Heat flamed in my cheeks. My engine raced. Just the man I'd come to see. Nick was of Hungarian descent, and he had his gypsy ancestors to thank for his all-over darkness, eyes, hair, and skin, and sharp cheekbones. He had a muscular ranginess that I loved, but he wasn't traditionally handsome. His nose was largish and crooked from being broken too many times. He'd once told me that a surfboard to the mouth had given him his snaggled front tooth, but he was gorgeous in an undefined way, and I often saw from the quick glances of other women that I wasn't the only one in the room who noticed. Now he noticed me. "Hi, Helen." "Hi, Paris," I replied. He snorted. "Oh, I'm definitely not your Paris. Paris was a wimp." Menelaus, then?" Beer." "I'm pretty sure there was no one named Beer in the story of Helen of Troy," I said, sniffing in a faux superior way. Nick spoke to the bartender. "St. Pauli girl." He finally gave me the Nick grin, and the tension left over from our elevator ride disappeared. Want one? I needed to gulp more than air for courage. Amstel Light. Nick placed the order. The bartender handed Nick 2 beers beaded with moisture, then shook water from his hands. Nick handed mine to me, and I wrapped a napkin around it, lining up the edges with the military precision I adored. Nick sang under his breath, his head bobbing side to side. Honky-tonk woman. I think I like you better in Shreveport than Dallas, I said. Thanks, I think. And I like seeing you happy. I guess it's been a tough year for you, losing your parents and all. Here's to that smile, he said, holding his beer aloft toward me. The toast almost stopped my heart. He was spot on about the tough part, but I did better when I kept the subject of my parents buried with them. I clinked his bottle, but couldn't look at him while I did it. Thanks, Nick, very much. Want to play pool? He asked. Let's do it. I was giddy, the sophomore girl out with the senior quarterback. We both loved music, so we talked about genres, bands, his old band, Stingray, and real bands, my minor in music at Baylor, and LSD, also known as lead singer disease. Over a bucket of beers, we swapped stories about high school, and he told me he'd once rescued an injured booby. An injured booby? I asked. Implants are natural. 8-ball in the corner pocket. I sank it. He gathered the balls out of the pockets and positioned them in the rack while I ground my Q-tip in the blue chalk and blew off the excess. You're so landlocked. A booby is a bird, Katie. I rolled his use of my real name back and forth in my brain, enjoying how it felt. I was out surfing, and I found a booby that couldn't fly. I carried it back home and took care of it until I could set it free. Oh my gosh, how bad did it smell? Did it peck you? I'll bet your mom was thrilled. I talked fast, in endless exclamation points. Embarrassing. I was a valley girl on acid, like, oh my God. It was in shock, so it was calm, but every day it got wilder. I was 14, and my mom was happy I wasn't in my room holding some girl's real booby, so she was fine with it. It smelled really bad after a few days, though. I broke. Balls clacked and ricocheted in every direction, and a striped one tumbled into a side pocket. Stripes, I called. So your mom had caught you before holding a girl's booby, huh? I didn't say that, he said, and stuttered to a stop. I was more smitten than ever. Damn, I Wish I Was Your Lover was playing in the background. I hadn't heard that song in years. It got me thinking. For months, I'd been fighting off the urge to slip my arms around Nick's neck and bite the back of it. But I was aware that most people would consider that inappropriate at work. Pretty small-minded of them, if you ask me. I eyed the large balcony outside the bar and thought that if I could just maneuver Nick out there, maybe I could make it happen. My chances seemed good enough until one of our colleagues walked in. Tim was of counsel at the firm. Of counsel meant he was too old to be called an associate, but he wasn't a rainmaker. Plus, he wore his pants pulled up an inch too high in the waist. The firm would never make him a partner. Nick and I locked eyes. Until now, we'd been 2 shortwave radios on the same channel, the signal crackling between us. But now, the dial had turned to static, and his eyes clouded over. He stiffened and moved subtly away from me. He hailed Tim up. Hey, Tim, over here. Tim waved to us and walked across the smoky bar. Everything moved in slow motion as he came closer, step by ponderous step. His feet echoed as they hit the floor, reverberating, no, no, no. Or maybe I was saying it aloud. I couldn't tell, but it made no difference. Hey, Tim. Hey, Tim, this is great. Grab a beer. Let's play some pool. Oh, please tell me Nick didn't just invite Tim to hang out with us. He could have given him a short, "Hey, how you doing? Have a nice night. I was just leaving," spiel. Or anything else for that matter, but no. He'd asked him to join us. Tim and Nick looked at me for affirmation. I entertained a fleeting fantasy in which I executed a perfect sidekick to Tim's gut, and he started rolling around on the floor with the dry heaves. What good were the 13 years of karate my father had insisted on if I couldn't use it at times like these? "Every woman should be able to defend herself, Katie," Dad would say as he dropped me off at the dojo. Maybe this wasn't technically a physical self-defense moment, but Tim's arrival had dashed my hopes for the whole neck bite thing and all that could have come after it. Wasn't that reason enough? I cast out the image. "Actually, Tim, why don't you take over for me? I was in trial all week and I'm exhausted. We have an early start tomorrow. It's the last day of our retreat, the grand finale for the Haley and Hart team." I handed my pool cue to Tim. Tim thought this was a fine idea. It was clear women scared him. If I had hoped for an argument from Nick, though, I didn't get one. He reverted to his outside of work, Katie who act. All I got from him was, "Good night," with neither a Helen nor a Katie tacked on. I grabbed another Amstel Light from the bar for the plod back to my room. Chapter 2. The Eldorado, Shreveport, Louisiana, March 14th, 2012. 15 minutes later, I'd liberated a bottle of wine from the minibar. I clutched my iPhone with an intent to text. Texting while intoxicated, never a good idea. I wish a cop had been there to cuff me. It would have saved me from what came next. To Nick. "You dumped me for Tim. I'm lonely." I might as well have added, "Love, your crazy stalker." No response. I waited 5 minutes while I finished a glass of wine. I refilled my glass. I scrolled through Emily's 300 texts asking where I was and responded to her with, "Nick! So sorry. Talk to you later." I sent another to Nick. "Are you there? Are you still with Tim?" "Hey," was his reply. Another text from Nick dinged seconds later. "We need to talk." Good talk or bad talk? I wondered. Talk as a euphemism for not talking? I responded to Nick. "Kay? Where? When?" "Monday. Office." Gut punch. Rally, Katie, rally. Don't let the moment slip away. There's still a chance. "No fair. Now? Pick a place." "Bad idea. Been drinking." "I can handle it. Room 632. No answer. Think. He didn't say no. He didn't say yes. I could text back and ask for a clear answer, but it might be the wrong one. Assume it's yes and get yourself together, girl. I inspected the Spartan hotel room, the dismal tan comforter graying from too many times through industrial washers, the tan drapes discolored from the room's smoker years, a framed mass-production print of a riverboat hanging on metallicized wallpaper. It didn't show much promise for a romantic interlude. I cleaned up the best I could anyway, the room and me, and tried to steady myself for sober thought and behavior. No Nick. I paced, I fussed, I checked for texts, and then, suddenly, I knew he was there, felt him with my extrasensory Nick perception. I peered out my peephole. Yes, there he was, doing the same thing as me on the other side of the thick slab of wood. I couldn't open the door, though, or he would know I was standing there watching him. He raised his hand to knock. He lowered it. He turned to walk away. He came back. He clawed his hand in a scrubbing motion through his hair and closed his eyes. He knocked. I held my breath while I said a quick prayer. Please, God, help me not screw this up. Probably not the most well-conceived or crafted prayer I'd ever uttered. I opened the door. Neither of us spoke. I stepped back and he walked in, clutching a bar napkin in his left hand. His right hand raked through his hair again, a nervous tic I had never noticed before this evening. I sat down on the bed. He sat in a chair by the window. You said we needed to talk, I prompted. He focused on his crumpled napkin for a long time. When he looked up, he motioned back and forth between the two of us and said, My life is way too complicated right now. I'm sorry, but this can't happen. These words were not the ones I had hoped to hear. Maybe they were approximately the ones I'd expected to hear, but I'd remained hopeful until he said them. My face burned. Countdown to meltdown. By this, I assume you're referring to some kind of thing between you and me? Of course it can't. I'm a partner at the firm. I heard my voice from far away, superior, distant. I know I come across as a flirt, but I'm this way with everyone, Nick. Don't worry, I'm not coming on to you. I could almost see the handprint on his face from the slap of my words. I heard you talking to Emily on your cell phone when you got here this afternoon. This sounded ominous. What are you talking about? I walked past your room. Your door was propped open. I saw you. I heard you. I protested. How do you even know it was me? I know your voice. You were talking about me. I heard my name. I'm sorry I eavesdropped, but I couldn't help it. I stopped and listened. I started to cut in again, but he plowed on. You said, and oh, how I didn't want to hear what came next, that you couldn't believe how attracted to me you were, that you felt guilty because you thought about me more than work or what happened to your parents. Nick stumbled over his words, struggling to get something out. You told Emily you couldn't help that you were in love with me. Oh, God. Oh, my. All that hot blood drained out of my face. I had said that on the phone to Emily. She'd called to make sure I was coming straight down to the session, and I'd turned the conversation to Nick. It was such a normal thing that I'd forgotten about it. Hell, it was so normal that she'd probably tuned it out. Suddenly, I knew how drunk I was, and the room teetered. I forced a glass-breaking laugh. Yes, I mentioned your name, but that isn't what I said. Yes, it was, he interrupted. I'm not a moron. I know what I heard. Well, you're misinterpreting it, I insisted. I'm not after you, Nick. For all I know, you're still married, and we work together. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. I'll try not to do it again. You didn't make me uncomfortable. He stopped and dragged his hand through his hair a third time, staring down at the napkin again. The damn thing had writing on it. It's just... He sighed and didn't go any further. Just what? No answer. I wish it was only alcohol that made me lash out with sarcasm next, but it wasn't. Why don't you consult your magic napkin to see what you should say? His face darkened. That was rude. I was just gathering steam. Well, it seems like you came in here with your speech all written out. Put poor lovesick Katie in her place. I sucked in a breath and spat out. I can't believe you had to make notes on a bar napkin. I'm not as good as you with words, Madam Lawyer. I wanted to get this right. Don't make fun of me for taking it seriously. Sorry for making you go to so much trouble." I wasn't sorry at the moment, and I suspect my tone made that quite clear. "By all means, finish reading your napkin." He stood up. "There's nothing else on my napkin that we need to talk about." Too late. I saw how awful I was acting. "Nick, I'm sorry. Forget I said that. I've had too much to drink. Shit, I drink too much lately, and I'm totally going to cut down. I hope this won't set our friendship back, and that we can go on normally at work. You know how I am. I'm way too forward, and I have a big mouth." I trailed off from my useless babbling and fought to keep eye contact with him. My thoughts jumbled. How had I misread him so badly? I had always believed that, deep down, he was as attracted to me, not merely on a physical level, as I was to him. That if I gave him the right opening and nudge, he would sweep me off my feet and into his magic carriage, away to happily ever after. How ridiculous that was. I wasn't Cinderella. I was Glenn Close with the boiled bunny, and he was Michael Douglas searching for a way to escape. I didn't know how to make it better. His eyes grew more hostile by the second. Without another word to me, he stomped out with that damn wadded-up napkin. Chapter 3. The El Dorado. Shreveport, Louisiana, March 15th, 2012. I woke up with a vicious hangover that was as much from humiliation as Amstel Light and minibar wine, and remembered Nick in my room and the way I had acted. It seemed unlikely that it could have gone much worse, but at least I hadn't met him naked at the door with a rose in my teeth. I would get up and pull myself together. I would be alluring in my moss-green Ellen Tracy sweater set. I would fix this. But first, I would check my texts because my phone was buzzing. At this early hour? "Where the hell are you?" It was Emily. Question mark, question mark. Getting ready. This stretched the truth, but the cardinal rule of texting is to keep it short, so I omitted the telling details. We started. Hurry your ass. Maybe it wasn't as early as I thought. On my way. Well, beautiful and together were out of the question now, although I don't know if I could have achieved them under the circumstances, no matter how much time I had. I scrabbled myself together in accordance with hygienic and aesthetic minimums and joined the team-building session, day 2 of 2. I hoped I could fake it well enough to fool my coworkers. I paused outside the open door to the conference room and listened to the presenter. The firm had hired a touchy-feely consultant to help us resolve any issues we had with each other in a positive, constructive way. Good luck with that, I thought. I wondered if he'd help me with my "I want to sleep with my possibly still married coworker who, oh yeah, by the way, hates me" issue. This was not a kumbaya type of session, though. The consultant was actually quite good. Today, we were learning how to talk about what we needed more of and less of from each other. He instructed us to partner up with the person with whom we most needed an effective working relationship. I breached the entrance to the garishly floral conference room. Within seconds, the pairing off was almost complete. I scanned the room for Emily's big blonde Texas hair, hoping she had waited for me. But she was with the lead paralegal, taking the activity way too seriously. I glared at her, and she shrugged with eyebrows raised as if to say, "It ain't my fault if you stand me up and then can't drag yourself out of bed until noon." I harumphed and searched the room for a partner. As I scanned the space, Nick's flat eyes slowly locked onto mine. Not good. I, too, kept my face expressionless. A gargantuan effort, considering that last night's minibar trail mix wanted back out. I started to turn away, then realized he was walking toward me. I expected him to move past me, until he didn't. He said nothing, so I spoke. I couldn't help it. I always led. No wonder my big brother told me I pushed men away. So, you want some more of this? I tried a self-deprecating smile. He didn't smile back. It seems like the best way to get this cleared up, so we'll have an understanding before we get back to the office. He waggled his hand back and forth between us. It reminded me of last night, and not in a good way. We took a seat. The flowers on the wallpaper and the floor weren't doing a lot to cheer me up. The vines in the carpet suddenly reached up and bound me to my chair by the ankles. No, you blockhead, that's your imagination and too much booze. Ugh, unnerving. I rubbed my hands on my forearms, trying to smooth out my goosebumps. Nick read the instructions aloud. We would take turns going through a list of exercises. First, we would tell each other the things we appreciated. Next, the things we needed more or less of. And finally, what we were committed to do more or less of for each other. In case we forgot these instructions, they were block printed in bold-colored marker on flip charts all around the room. I appreciate you, posters, for breaking up this flowery nightmare, I thought. You go first, Nick. I think you need to remember what you appreciate about me. I said it in a playful tone. He didn't reciprocate, nor did he hesitate. I appreciate that you are a professional who does a good job and works hard. You're important to the firm. Not exactly warm. Thank you, Nick. Anything else? You can keep the compliments coming if you want. I tried another smile, head tilted to the right. My best tilt. That's it. This was going swell. Okay, then. What I appreciate about you is... While he was taking the strictly professional route, I refused to be so impersonal. Your creativity and insight, and how well we worked together on the Burnside case. I channeled BS speak from the atmosphere, a legal version of a bad Dr. Phil episode. And I appreciate that you don't have a bar napkin with you today. Hint, hint, Nick, let's get past this. No chance. Now we do the next part, more and less of. He ran his hands through his hair. Uh-oh. What I want you to do more of is let Gino know when you need support from me, and he and I will work it out. What I want you to do less of is... He hesitated, then said, corner me. Did I hear that wrong? Or had Nick just dumped me and accused me of stalking him? In so many words. Even after the difficult end to our evening, the professional drop kick seemed extreme. Was he suggesting I had sexually harassed him? I went from 0 to 60 on the rage meter in less than a second. Oops. You don't want to work with me anymore? I corner you? We have one hard personal conversation, and you refuse to work with me. Can you please keep your voice down? He hissed. I threw up my hands. He took that as a yes and went on. I just want to minimize our contact, he said. His voice matched his eyes. That's absurd. Nick's hand went up, and I ratcheted back my volume. We're a great team. It's a huge benefit to this firm when we work together. I don't understand why you're doing this. Is it all because of last night? 100 eyes were watching me crumble into emotional rubble. No, that was just paranoia. My hands reached for my collar and tried to tug it open further. I'm not going to talk about why. I just need some space. If you've got a problem with me, you need to take it to Gino. Decision and self-control time. If I made a bigger scene, I'd embarrass him. And then I would never be able to fix it. I had spent half of last night reconciling myself to there never being an us. No, Nick and Katie. I disliked practicing law, but in the last year, I had loved working with Nick. Working with him was better than nothing. It might even be enough. But if he took that away, all I'd have left was me, and the thoughts I didn't want to think. I had to be realistic, too. I was important to the firm, but Nick's soon-to-be ex-father-in-law was our biggest client. This rift had to stay between Nick and me. There would be no going to Gino for me. Besides, what would I say to him? Gino, Nick won't work with me because he thinks I want to sleep with him. Make him be nice to me, or I'll throw a temper tantrum. I spoke in measured words. I guess I have no choice. I will honor your wishes, but let me be 100% clear. This is your decision. I don't understand it, and it's not what I want. I also promise to be honest with you. I'll start that right now. It seemed like a good place to start, since I'd lied to him last night and he knew it. This hurts me. You're treating me like you hate me. We had a regrettable moment this weekend. I think we should talk about this again back at the office. I won't feel any differently there, Nick said. He stood halfway up, but I stopped him. Hold on. I get to say what I would like you to do more and less of, too. He sat back down. I ignored the stabbing pain in my stomach and spoke. I would like you to do more keeping an open mind and less judging and making knee-jerk decisions. Okay. Okay, you commit to that? Okay, I heard you. We stared at each other for several more seconds. Then Nick got up. The feet of his chair made a horrible shriek noise against the steel wool hotel carpet. I cringed. My cringe timing was bad, based on the tightening of his lips and brows. He stalked off. I stayed rooted to my chair. A little while later, seconds, minutes, Emily interrupted my impression of a block of ice. Earth to Katie, it's break time. Are you coming? She asked. Her voice was snippy, but less so than her texts earlier. I glanced up at her. She was all long legs, in cowboy boots and blue jeans that she had topped with a Gap denim jacket and purple cotton knit shirt. Thanks, no, I'll meet you back in here, I said. Emily walked out of the conference room with a group of paralegals. I beelined for the bar. What drink was respectable at 10 a.m.? I ordered a Bloody Mary, a drink I'd never tried. Who knew how good Bloody Marys were? The first one worked well for me, so I got another. With the help of my new friend, Bloody Mary, I decided I could repair things with Nick. Only I couldn't find him. When we returned from break, I cornered Emily. Have you seen Nick? I asked her. Emily sighed. He left. I heard him tell Gino he had a family emergency. A bust. The rest of the day passed. I don't remember much of it. I think I made appropriate facial expressions and comments when required. Or maybe I didn't. My washing machine mind was churning with thoughts of Nick. Sometime that afternoon, Emily drove me home in my practical old silver Accord. The day became the night, and the night became more of the day, and when I woke up the next day to the sound of my brother's voice, I was sprawled across my living room couch. Chapter 4. Katie's Condo, Dallas, Texas. March 16th, 2012. You have any better excuse for not returning my calls than this? Colin said in a stern Big Brother tone. I forced my eyes open long enough to see him gesturing around the living room of my once beautiful apartment. Colin was my Irish twin, my elder by 11 months. We finished high school the same year, though, because my dad, a good Texan, had insisted on holding Colin back a year to help him gain a size advantage on the football field. Thus, we had become classmates as well as siblings. Even so, Colin had always acted paternal toward me, especially in the past year after we'd lost Mom and Dad. I opened my eyes a slit, enough to see the mess. I supposed it didn't look good. I'm usually particular to a fault about my surroundings. Colin has always called me OCD, but I don't agree. I vacuum backwards because I don't like how footprints look on the rug. I arrange my clothes by season and subcategorize them by function and color because who doesn't? And while not everyone combs the fringe on their throw pillows, I think they should. Tangled fringe. The horror. Those last few weeks, though? Well, not so much. There were, gasp, fast food wrappers on the kitchen table and a couple of empty V8 and Kettle One vodka bottles out on the counter. It wasn't unsanitary by Dennis the Menace standards, but if you knew me as well as my brother did, it was troubling. My PJs were yesterday's work clothes, and the clothes from the days before lay in an undry-cleaned heap beside the couch. The couch, on which the throw-pillow fringe was taunting me with knots and clumps. The television blared Bon Jovi's Runaway over a DirecTV 80s rock music station. An almost drained Bloody Mary mocked me from the coffee table, where it sat by my red Vio laptop, a bottle of Excedrin, and my iPhone. I sat up in as dignified a manner as I could manage and smoothed out my clothes. "Why didn't I hear the alarm when you came in?" I asked him. Colin had a set of keys to my place, but my alarm should have beeped when he opened the door. Bluntly, Colin said, "I guess you were too drunk to remember to set it. Or maybe you had a visitor that left late?" He looked around for a second glass, but I'd been drinking alone. Colin started picking up my mess. "Colin, I'll do that," I said. "Nope, you go freshen up," he said. "I'm taking you to breakfast. That's an order." I stared at him woefully. He was wearing his usual 501 jeans with a Hooters t-shirt, and he radiated, "I've got no problems." I didn't want to go to breakfast with him. I wanted to curl into the fetal position. I wanted to sleep and be alone. I wanted to be so still that I didn't exist. He looked at me, motionless on the couch, and something he saw made him put down the trash and come back over to me. Taking my hand, he pulled me to my feet. He held my stiff body in a bear hug, rocking me gently for a moment. Uh-oh. At first, I tried to hold it in, but then I folded and sobbed on his big shoulder. Sobs became snorts, then hiccups, then shuddering breaths. He tilted my head back with a big thumb under my chin and looked into my eyes, appraising me. "Go take a hot shower. We'll eat somewhere casual. But I'm leaving, with you in the car, in 20 minutes. He chucked the side of my chin with his knuckles. "Chop, chop. You know I'll come in after you if I have to. Don't make me do it." With a soft push, he sent me down the hall to my bathroom, and then I heard him resume cleaning. Tears rolled down my nose and cheeks. Ye gads, I would have to drink gallons of water at breakfast because, at the rate I was crying and with the amount of vodka I had consumed last night, I was on the brink of a major dehydration headache. 45 minutes later, we took our seats in the Mockingbird Lane IHOP. It was a favorite place from our childhood, but today I noticed that it had a lot of garish orange in its decor, and I liked it a little less because of it. Colin surprised me when he requested a table for 3, but I didn't expend the energy to question him. I understood when I saw Emily's pageant hair at the hostess stand. She walked toward us in pleated navy blue pants and a silky yellow shirt cinched with a leather belt that matched her brown pumps. "Hi, Katie." She looked at me for a moment, then averted her eyes. I lifted a limp hand in greeting. Great. Another person to see me in this state. I had shunned my image in the mirror before I left the condo, but the brief glimpse I got was enough. Wet ponytail, an old tracksuit and t-shirt, puffy-eyed and sallow. Ick. We avoided talking by staring at our menus until the middle-aged waitress, who really should have worn a one-size-larger uniform, came for our order. My stomach muscles tightened as she walked away. I almost stopped her to add an orange juice I didn't want to my order, but I didn't. No use delaying the inevitable. Colin had assembled us for a reason, and something unpleasant cometh. "Emily and I have been talking, and she filled me in on what's happening with you," Colin said. I hoped Emily had held some of it back, but I couldn't fault her for caring about me. Or caving into Colin. He was a cop, in the fine tradition of our father, and he'd never met a witness he couldn't crack, he liked to say. Colin kept the floor. "We're worried about you. You're messed up. You're hurting yourself." He looked at Emily for confirmation, and she stared at the white Formica tabletop. If I knew Colin, he'd dragged her into this little intervention, and if I knew him, she was as reluctant as hell. Emily was self-confident, but boat rocking was not her style. I didn't have the strength to fight Colin on this, and I didn't actually disagree with him. I was a train wreck right now for sure. He had me at one of those rare moments when the tough-talking woman wasn't around to defend the fragile girl inside me. She was probably still sprawled across my couch, nursing her hangover. "You're right," I confessed. The words were dust on my dry tongue. "I need to get myself together." "I think you should go to rehab." Colin's words sounded harsh, because that's the only way words like "go to rehab" can sound. So this was how Amy Winehouse felt. And she was dead now. Something to think about. Except I wasn't Amy Winehouse. I've been in the dumps, yes. And I've been drinking too much, but only for a few weeks. I don't think that warrants rehab. The thought of talking about my problems with all of those alcoholic people made me claustrophobic. AA may work for most people, but I don't do group activities very well. Besides, I was not an alcoholic. "These last 3 weeks were especially bad, but you've been on this road for much longer than that," Colin said. "Like a year? Can you cut back or stop? I'll bet you've already tried that, haven't you?" I avoided his eyes. "And I'll bet it didn't work." "No, asshole, I haven't," I almost said. Almost. Instead, I said, "I haven't tried. I know I can when I'm ready." My cheddar omelet came, but I wasn't hungry. None of us touched our food. I admit that I'd have trouble stopping here in Dallas if I did try. When I do try. But I know that if I could get out of my life for a few weeks, I could get this under control. I'm willing to start with that. Rehab's not for me. Maybe if you're pulling me out of the gutter someday, but not now. Fine. I'll give you one chance, sis, so make it count. Do you have anything in mind? Colin asked. I sucked in as much air as I could get, then forcibly exhaled until my stomach collapsed in. St. Marcos. I need to get some closure on what happened to Mom and Dad. I started to cry, then swallowed it. I opened my mouth to speak, and the tears started again. Are you sure? Colin asked. I nodded and used the clean side of my paper napkin to wipe my eyes. As I looked up, a young black woman caught my eye, partly because she was staring at me, and partly because she was barefoot in IHOP, and her clothing looked 150 years out of place. Now, she had a problem. Drugs, from the look of it. A total rehab candidate. Not me. I wiped my eyes again, and when I opened them, she was gone. Nothing there at all. I was going nuts. I gulped air. I desperately needed to get away. This trip, this solo rehab or mini sabbatical or whatever it was, would be a godsend. And so we agreed that I would go immediately, as in tomorrow. Yikes. A little sooner than I'd anticipated, but Colin insisted, and Emily promised to help me make it happen. Colin and I shook on it when he dropped me back at my condo, and Emily was right behind us. Emily and I rolled into work at Haley and Hart mid-morning, after I had changed into a work-acceptable cream-colored summer pantsuit. We didn't get much done other than booking my trip and clearing my schedule for it. I talked to Gino about the vacation days, expecting him to argue with me, but he didn't. He patted my hand. Ugh. "Time off will do you a world of good," he said. "You've worked hard this year under difficult circumstances, and you need to recharge and bring your best self back." Great. That was boss speak for, "You're a hot mess. Get the frick out of here." Well, I was. A humiliated, hot mess. Tomorrow wasn't sounding too soon to get away from that after all. At Colin's request, Emily babysat me overnight, leaving her husband home alone. Emily was a far better friend than I deserved, but once upon a time, I had played her role when Rich temporarily broke off their engagement. Life in balance. Late in the evening, I finally mentioned the name no one had uttered all day. "If Nick asks where I am, please give him the sanitized version." Emily was sitting at a bar stool, and I was standing across the counter in my kitchen. She leaned toward me. "Don't even go there. Nick has acted like friggin' Heathcliff to you ever since Shreveport. Come on, girl, let it go." I was getting a lot of veiled messages today. This one was, "He's just not that into you." Ouch. But she was right. But could I leave my feelings about him here and truly go off to St. Marcus with a clear head? I tossed and turned in my bed all night, buffeted between images of my parents and Nick. Chapter 5. DFW International Airport, Dallas, Texas, March 17th, 2012. "Please turn off and stow away all electronic devices at this time," came the voice of the flight attendant over American Airlines' PA system. Crap. I was writing an email to Emily promising her a ribeye dinner from Del Frisco's, my treat, if she'd remove the leftover sushi from my refrigerator. But I had enough time to hit send. I had tucked myself into my first-class upgrade seat on the way to St. Marcos with my essentials around me. Passport, Red Vio laptop, iPhone in its zebra print OtterBox. I know Dell and BlackBerry are the technologies of choice for most attorneys, but I like to flatter myself that I was not like everybody else. Of course, lately I was living up to the worst of the attorney stereotypes, the hard-drinking one. Bad on me. The email I'd sent yesterday to my non-work friends explained my sudden disappearance as a vacation. They could picture me sipping pina coladas on the beach and dancing the nights away to calypso music with a sexy West Indian man, getting my groove back like Stella. Emily would take care of a similar work announcement for me this morning. Speaking of West Indian men, the slightly paunchy one next to me in first class was trying to read my screen. I turned it farther away from him. Where were his first-class manners, anyway? I turned my attention back to my email. Shouldn't I tell Nick myself? Maybe he had acted Heathcliffish, but up until Shreveport, I would have sent him a flirty note about my trip. If he disappeared, I would want to know why. Ipso facto, wouldn't he? Under the grip of this logic lapse, I shot off a quick email to him. To nick.kovacs@haleyhart.com from katie.connell@haleyhart.com. Subject, travel. Nick, I'm letting you know, on the off chance you notice I'm gone, that I'm on a Caribbean vacation. Back in a week. Emily will shepherd my cases while I am out. And Nick, I am sorry for everything. Katie. I had promised him I'd tell him the truth from Shreveport forward. Well, I was mostly honest, because this was sort of a vacation. I closed my eyes with my finger on send, wavering. Ma'am, you'll have to turn that off and put it away now. The gray-haired flight attendant leaned down, a taut smile on her face. How she must hate repeating those words over and over and over each day to people like me, who would lie, cheat, and steal to sneak a few more precious seconds of airtime before takeoff. I was a good girl this time, though. No problem, I said. I hit send and turned my screen off. Well, sort of a good girl. I readjusted in my seat, pulling my purple maxi dress out of an uncomfortable twist under my legs. My name's Guy, the man next to me said. He offered his hand. No. I wanted to sleep. I took his hand, his very soft hand, Vaseline intensive care soft, and said, Katie, nice to meet you, then broke eye contact. I leaned my head back. Don't think about dandruff, lice, and other headborne nastiness, I told myself. I immediately could think of nothing but. A toddler screamed. I craned my head around my seat back to find the culprit. A young father was traveling alone with a child in the first row of coach. This didn't bode well. The flight attendant was back. Her skin looked younger than her hair, and her eyes were bright. May I get you a beverage before we take off, ma'am? I was anxious after sending that email to Nick. L'enfant terrible and the potential lice issue grated on my nerves. I was heading off to conquer demons and confront personal issues in a foreign environment. Even a responsible drinker would order a cocktail in first class under these conditions. Bloody Mary, someone said. Me. Oops. Absolutely, ma'am. Well, I wasn't at the resort. I wasn't even on St. Marcos yet. If you really thought about it, this was the countdown, but the ball hadn't dropped. I didn't need to take a break from drinking until I got there. Besides, what were flight upgrades to first class for, if not the free drinks? Sure, they served you a microwaved bowl of mixed nuts and handed you a hot hand towel with a pair of kitchen tongs. Maybe they even gave you a gooey chocolate chip cookie, if you were lucky. But the booze was what it was all about. Make that two, my new friend Guy said. He leaned slightly toward me and said, That just sounded perfect. I've been in Los Angeles to meet with television producers about filming a show on St. Marcos. Most tiring. Isn't that nice? I said. When we landed on St. Marcos, I still felt tipsy good from my in-flight libations. I wished Guy a fond farewell and lied, both about my last name and the resort at which I was staying, to ensure I wouldn't accidentally see him again. I took a seat in the taxi van for the Peacock Flower Resort, bobbing my head appreciatively to the beat of Bob Marley's I Shot the Sheriff. When I arrived at the hotel, it was even more beautiful than I'd imagined. It stood proudly, pink stucco, 2 stories, surrounded by royal palms. I could see why my parents had loved staying here. As I breezed through the entrance, the doorman handed me a clear plastic glass of rum punch with a big chunk of pineapple on the side. Fruit. Dinner. The people here were perfectly lovely. I checked in, and the front desk clerk sent the nicest young man to assist me to my room. He refreshed my rum punch before we set out. "Long thirsty walk to your room, miss," he said with a wink. His accent was delicious. My room was right on the beach, but tucked back into a grove of palm trees for privacy. "A lot of famous people stay in this room." He looked at me intently. "Should I know you?" "You're awfully beautiful, miss. Are you a model?" I chose to overlook the fact that he was making this comment only moments before he left me in my room, so it was ideally timed to coincide with my decision about tipping. I said, "Why, thank you," and pressed a $20 bill into his hand. He half bowed appreciatively and wished me a pleasant good afternoon. I surveyed my surroundings. Good. The desk area was just right. I put my purse on the floor beside it and squared my laptop perfectly, just the way I liked it. I checked my phone. It had lost its charge. I pawed through my laptop bag for the phone charger and plugged it in. God knows how much time I'd lost waiting for messages with a dead mobile. Probably right when Nick would have emailed me back, too. I unpacked while the phone gathered enough juice for a connection. I continued my self-tour of the suite. The resort's website had claimed the bathtub was big enough for two, and it was as-built. Large enough to hold me and my evil, sharp-tongued alter ego who drank too much. Earth-hued marble tiles of varying shades, textures, sizes, shapes, and patterns filled the bathroom. It should have been too much, but it wasn't. It was stunning. The muted tropical palette of the rest of the suite set off the natural tones of the bathroom beautifully. It was the best of outdoors brought softly inside. The furniture and ceiling fan were bamboo. The linens, an ivory pinstripe Egyptian cotton of what felt like 1,000 thread count, covered by a fluffy cream-colored duvet. I couldn't wait to get in and roll around in those sheets, to rub crisp cotton on my skin. Most of the color in the room, brilliant yellows, palmetto greens, and fuchsia, came from fresh cuttings of local plants and flowers. A set of French doors opened from the bedroom onto a patio tiled with almond-colored travertine pavers. The patio spilled out onto a short lawn dotted with coconut palms that ended with private beach access. Beyond the broad beach was the turquoise and sapphire Caribbean Sea. I smiled. This would do nicely. My iPhone had charged enough for a data download. I picked it up and scrolled through my email. My secretary had sent a few questions, and Colin and Emily had both asked me to let them know I'd arrived safely. I did so, and scrolled through more messages. Junk, mostly. And then I came to one that cut off my breath. A response from Nick. I put the iPhone down until I could breathe normally. I wiped my palms on my purple skirt, then picked the phone back up. No biggie. I was fine. The body of the email was short. Okay. 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 2 lowercase letters, 1 word. Not exactly a lot for me to go by. He could have deleted my email without reading it. He could have read it and not answered. He could have read it and answered by saying something rude. Was it okay, rude? Or he could have read it and answered with something positive, like, "I'll see you when you return," or "Good luck." My brain started speeding around its familiar Nick paths, a NASCAR wannabe around a trailer park. This was not good. I drained my rum punch, and I ate my dinner of pineapple garnish. I looked in the mini-fridge. Jackpot. A whole pitcher of rum punch was waiting for me inside. Unfortunately, there wasn't any fruit. Fruit juice was healthy enough, though. Rum punch would make a perfect island substitute for Bloody Marys. I poured myself a glass. Nick. The incredibly cold jerk. I fought with myself not to answer him. I drank the rum punch. Fought with myself some more. Drank some more. And then I made up my mind. I was getting out of there. I grabbed my purse, phone, and room key and stomped up to the bar I'd seen during check-in. The bar was a covered hilltop patio overlooking the beach and the ocean. I hiked up the stone steps and found a good crowd around the mahogany bar and at round tables scattered around the tiled floor. A few people danced, close and sultry, to a reggae band who sounded pretty good. They were playing a song about 96 degrees in the shade. The female singer growled the chorus, "Real hot in the shade." I sat down at the bar and turned to watch them when I got my Bloody Mary from the blonde, dreadlocked bartender. After one sip, I realized it was all wrong and ordered a rum punch. "You throwin' out a perfectly good drink. What's wrong with you, gal?" The voice pronounced girl as gal. I did a double take, then realized it was the singer. "I changed my mind," I said. "Unless you got some dread disease, you can't give that ting to me," she said. I pushed the glass to her, fighting back my willies over sharing cooties with a stranger. I didn't want to appear rude. "I took a sip," I warned her. She pulled the straw out of the drink and tossed it toward the trash can behind the bar. She missed. "Tanks. Singing thirsty work." She stuck out her hand. "Hi, Ava." I took her hand and shook. "Katie. My people dem just up and leave before we throw our last set. Trouble." I tried to follow, but her sing-song accent threw me. I missed half of what she said. She took pity on me. "La, you don't understand me." She slugged down some Bloody Mary. "I said, my bandmates just left me, and we hadn't even done our last set. We're going to be in trouble with the owner." She spoke in the Queen's English this time, enunciating each word perfectly. "Oh, wow. Yes, I understand now. Sorry, I talk local when I'm performing, or when I'm talking to other locals, but I can yank just fine when I need to." "Yank?" "Talk like a Yankee. It's like speaking two languages. Talking local greases the wheel and impresses the tourists. It's part of being Banya." "What's Banya mean?" "In Yank, it means born here. You may live on St. Marcos for 40 years, but you are only truly local if you Banya," which I was. "Now, I owe you a drink," she said, signaling the bartender. "And I always pay back my debts to my friends." Chapter 6. Peacock Flower Resort, St. Marcos, USVI, March 18th, 2012. I woke up on my chaise lounge the next morning, fully clothed in my maxi dress from the day before. Same song, different verse, but I was even more disgusted with myself than usual. I was here to look into the deaths of my parents and straighten myself out, which was supposed to include cutting down on the drinking and thinking about something other than Nick. It seemed that all I had done was bring my baggage with me into this world, and that I was set to make the present into more of the past. Way to go, me. In a moment of gut-dropping panic, I remembered part of the night before. The email from Nick. The rum punch. The hotel bar. Had I sent him another message? Oh, please no. I shot upright, my heart pounding in my ears. Blue water was teasing the brown sand of the beach in front of me. In the distance, 2 small children played with buckets at the waterline. Overhead, the morning sun shone through palm fronds to kiss the carpet of grass in front of my patio. The serenity of my retreat comforted me. Everything would be okay. I found my phone beside me and scrolled through the sent text and emails on my iPhone. Nothing, thank God. I had blown it last night. Today, though, I would begin looking into the mystery of my parents' deaths, and I would start over on the personal front. After a few hours more sleep, I folded myself back into the chair. "La, girl, we party like rock stars," a woman said. A woman almost right beside me, from the sound of it. I sat up again, even more quickly. I recognized the husky voice. The name of the woman it belonged to was a blank to me. I searched for it. Abigail. Ariel? Eva? No, Ava. It was Ava. I forced out a laugh. "Yeah, I guess we did. What I can remember of it." I looked down at the chaise on the far side of the patio, and sure enough, there was Ava. She stood up on her tiptoes and stretched her arms toward the sky, something better done in an outfit other than a yellow lycra mini-dress. I averted my gaze. She finished and plopped back in her chair, tugging at her eye. "So I guess we better get started," she said, and laid a set of false eyelashes down on the patio table and started working on the other eye. "I vote for a barrel of water and 2 Excedrin with a mess of eggs first, though." I had absolutely no idea what this woman was talking about. I tried to shake the hangover cobwebs from my head. Should I worry? I'd read about pirates and crooks in the Caribbean. Maybe she was a swindler of some sort. I could, in essence, be her prisoner. It was a stretch, but it was possible. Something nudged my brain cells toward memory, then faded out. Ava kept talking. "I know the cook in the restaurant. He hook us up." Ava reached for the phone on the patio table beside her. I listened to her order in her island patois. She had continued her ablutions while on the phone, removing earrings, a bracelet, and a necklace, and she stood up again when she ended the call. "Chop, chop, Katie. They expecting us down at the station." She pulled off her dress in a single fluid motion, revealing flawless cafe au lait curves reined in somewhat by a leopard print satin bra and panties. My hands found my own jutting hip bones. Pippi Longstocking next to her Beyoncé. She ducked into my room. I clamped my jaw shut and focused on her words. Police station. Yes, that was it. Snatches of our conversation last night floated back to me, including me telling Ava about my quest to find out what had happened to my parents and her call to some police officer she used to date, or that wanted to date her, or something. Yes, that was it. I remembered. Relief. She poked her head back around the door as she gathered her long, curly black hair into a top knot. "You mind if I use the shower first?" "That's fine," I said. She raised one eyebrow. "You okay?" I jumped to my feet. "Absolutely. Let's hurry with the showers and try to finish before room service arrives." "Yaman," she said, and disappeared again. I tipped my head back with my eyes closed and pinched the bridge of my nose. Just because I remembered last night, it didn't necessarily make today a good idea. I didn't even know Ava. Was this insane? I lifted my head back to its normal position. Well, I was about to find out. Chapter 7. Peacock Flower Resort, St. Marcos, USVI, March 18th, 2012. "I can't believe you're dropping everything to help me," I said. Ava had poured her curves into a bikini top and blue jean miniskirt, both of which belonged to me, then slipped on one of my button front shirts and tied its sides together above her belly button. She was barefoot. "Best offer I got for the day," she said. "I just moved back on island 6 months ago. I do the dancing, singing, acting, starving thing in New York, but my parents getting older, and well, I can't stay away from St. Marcos forever. It gets in your blood."
She picked up her phone, searched until she found what she wanted, then handed me her phone. She had pulled up a picture of herself, standing between a much older white man and a dark-skinned woman who split the difference between his and Ava's age. "My parents," she explained. "So I can understand why you're here. If something happened to Mom or Dad, I do the same thing." I told her plenty last night, it seemed. "They're beautiful," I said. "You're a perfect mix of them." I handed her back her phone. And she was. Ava dripped sexy and, with latte skin and wavy black hair, could pass for almost any race. Italian, Egyptian, Mexican, or all of the above. It was a mix that worked. She pulled a lipstick out of her teeny pocketbook and walked into the bathroom, still talking. "Yeah, they're great. So anyway, I home. But they're not a lot of work on island for NYU-trained stage actresses who specialize in Broadway musicals and no other employable skills." I raised my voice so she could hear me in the bathroom. "I can relate. I was a voice major in college before I wised up. I spent 3 years hearing how little money I'd make in music." "You sing? Girl, why you not tell me that last night? We could have put you up on stage." "No way," I said and laughed. It was a long time ago. "Don't mean nothing. Well, anyway, I'm glad you're here. This much better than watching Oprah with Mom." Ava came back into the bedroom and stood with her hands on her hips, studying me. "Fact is, I think you all right." I liked her, even if she was my polar opposite, and I loved to listen to her, was even starting to understand her better. Duh was the, and dare was there, for instance. This wasn't that hard at all. I told her, "Well, again, thank you for helping me." Ava put her foot next to mine and cocked her head. "I need some shoes. All I got is the fuck me pumps I wore last night. My feet pretty big, so maybe if we try the smallest shoe you got?" Her F word jarred me a little, thanks to the upbringing of my kindergarten teacher mother, but I didn't take offense about my feet. I was 4 inches taller than her. "How about these?" I asked, tossing her some reef thong sandals that were half a size smaller than I should have bought. She slid her feet into them and struck a shoe shopping pose. "What do you think?" "I think you look better in my stuff than I do, and we'd better get going or I'll start to hate you for it." She laughed and stuck one arm through mine. "Yeah, or I'm gonna hate you for making my bana look bigger than it already do," she said, slapping her own posterior with her other hand. "Come, let we go." Ava slipped her arm out of mine. I put on my sunglasses, grabbed my purse from the desk, and stuck my feet into Betsy Johnson sandals that were, blessedly, too big for my new friend. Ava followed me out the door. I walked briskly down the sidewalk, energized by the gorgeous morning, to the rental car that the concierge had arranged to be dropped here for me. "Slow down and lime a little, Katie. You're moving too fast for island time," Ava called from behind me. I opened the door to the lovely green Malibu. "Lime. I can lime. Check." As we drove, Ava coached me on the niceties of island greetings, explaining how important blending was to my quest's success. "Don't say hello. Say good morning, good day, and good night. Say it when you walk into a room full of people, to no one in particular. You don't have to make eye contact. Pause a long time after you say it and give the other person a chance to say it back and make a polite inquiry after your health and family. Then, and only then, get down to your business. If you don't do this, you get nothing done." "Yes, ma'am," I said, and I saluted. "I serious. If you move fast, talk fast, and don't say the right things, a West Indian only pretend to listen, and you think things going fine when they not." I reined in the mirth. "I know you're serious, and I appreciate the help." "Still, let me do most of the talking." I wasn't all that good at letting someone else speak for me, but I'd try. We were in the middle of town at this point, and I swerved to avoid a limo that pulled out of a parking place right in front of me. As I pulled to my left, I felt a crunch under one of my tires. I tapped my horn. It was hard enough driving on the left without this. I cut my eyes to the rearview mirror and read the license plate backwards. Vanity plates. It figured. They read, Bonds Ent. "That, my future husband," Ava said, pointing back at the limo. "Really?" "Nah, he just rich enough to keep me." A block later, I heard a thump, thump, thump. Flat tire. "Shit," I said, pulling over. "Sunday morning," Ava said, as if that explained something to me. I must have looked a question at her because she added, "Broken glass from the partiers downtown." "Ah," I said, because I'm profound. "It not a problem," Ava said, and jumped out. I followed her onto the sidewalk. With a toss of her hair over her shoulder, she soon had a crowd of West Indian men ready to lend a hand. "Ah, me son, that what dose big muscles for," she flattered her help along, bending over to let a young fellow get a good look at her cleavage. "I can show you what they for if you just let me," he replied. "La, you do much for the likes of me. You must have women dem fighting over you day and night. You the only girl for me, Ava. You just say the word." When the tire change was complete, she extricated herself from the throng, effortlessly. We got back in the car. "That was impressive," I said. Ava just smiled. We continued driving through downtown among the old Danish-style buildings. Stucco and arches in a muted rainbow of colors predominated. Nearly every other building was in some state of disrepair. Some were missing their roofs. Hurricanes past, maybe? Others had only crumbling rubble where walls used to stand. Locals loitered in small groups on the street corners. More often than I would have expected, we passed a ragtag vagrant pushing a shopping cart filled with castaway treasures. T-shirt-clad tourists dodged unseeing amongst the locals, shopping bags dangling from their hands, ice cream cones pressed to their lips. Soon, though, we had passed through downtown. On its far edge, we came to a baby blue 2-story Danish building. Police headquarters. We pulled into the parking lot and got out. It was time to do right by Mom and Dad.
Chapter 8. Taino, St. Marcos, USVI, March 18th, 2012.
Ava had arranged for us to meet her friend at the crack of 11:30. We entered the old house converted into a police station 15 minutes late, which Ava assured me was timely bordering on early. Ava, rolling in earthy and sexy, and me, holding back my normal long stride and feeling ridiculously virginal in my white sundress next to her. I took off my sunglasses and snapped them in their case in my purse. "Good day," I announced as we walked into the station. A chorus of "good days" rang out in answer. I nearly laughed. Ava looked to see if I was mocking her,
then rewarded me with an approving nod.
"Good day. We here to see Jacoby," she said to the female clerk seated at the desk behind the front counter, interrupting her from doing nearly nothing. Ava was surrounded by helpful officers within seconds, all claiming to know Jacoby, be Jacoby, or be more man than Jacoby ever would be. They crowded the first-floor lobby, a small room that, likely 100 years ago, was someone's front parlor. Now it housed folding chairs and a laminate coffee table covered with well-thumbed magazines and newspapers. I picked up a newspaper while Ava held court and idly read about the acquisition of the local cell phone company by some big wheeler dealer on the island. His name was Bonds. Gregory Bonds. I chortled at my secret funny. Ah, yes, this must be Ava's future husband, the guy with a bad driver. I put it down when I couldn't stand the reporters fawning anymore. When the real Jacoby came forward, I was shocked. He was a black Shrek, not the ebony island god I had pictured as a counterpart to Ava's sultry beauty. Ava let out a girlish squeal, another surprise, and threw her arms around his neck to a chorus of disappointed male murmurs, grunts, and a noise that sounded like someone sucking saliva through their teeth. Yuck. The other police officers dispersed, disappearing behind doors and up a staircase visible through a hall adjacent to the lobby. "Katie, this here Jacoby. We school chums from the time we in kindergarten. Jacoby, Katie." He stuck out his hand. "Darren Jacoby." I took it. "Nice to meet you, Officer Jacoby. I'm Katie Connell." Jacoby gestured toward one of the rooms off the lobby, and we walked over. He opened the solid wood door onto a spare conference room with thick interior concrete walls, built to withstand Mother Nature. There was a folding-type metal table and more folding chairs, identical to the ones in the lobby. Again, my mind regressed the room to its roots. A bedroom, I decided. We took seats around the table. "So, Ava, I guess I didn't dream your booty call to me last night," he said. If there ever was an example of hope springing eternal, this was it. "You dream at a booty call, but I did ring you up," she answered. "Katie needs some help. Her parents died on St. Marcos last year when they here on vacation." He tore his attention away from Ava. "I'm sorry, Miss Connell," he said. "Katie, please, and thank you." He motioned for me to keep speaking. Had Ava asked to do the talking, I decided she hadn't meant it, and took over. "The police told my brother and me that our parents died in a car wreck. No offense at all to the St. Marcos police, but given the circumstances as they were explained to us, it felt all wrong. Unlike them. I was hoping I could talk to the officer who worked on the case and maybe see the file, iron out my doubts and come to grips with it," I explained. His eyes narrowed. "Do you know the officer's name?" he asked. "I don't," I said. "I'm sorry." Colin would. I should have asked him. "Their name Connell?" he asked. "Yes, Frank and Heather Connell." Without another word, he pushed his chair back. One of the feet had lost its pad, and it made a scraping noise that reminded me of Shreveport and Nick. Jacoby left the room. "That was abrupt," I said to Ava. "They tend to close ranks, especially if you're not Banya," Ava said. "That's why I told you last night you need me with you. And we need to work with Jacoby, at least as much as we can." A thought occurred to me. I hope he wasn't the officer on the case. If he was, I just all but accused him of messing up. Ava sat there with a Mona Lisa smile on her lips. The seconds ticked forward around the wall clock behind her. 1 minute passed, then another, and then another. Ava pulled out her phone and started playing with it. I jerked my hand away from my mouth, realizing too late that I'd ripped the cuticle from my index finger. A drop of blood welled up. Then Jacoby was back, his bristles filling the room. He held a folder under one arm and a small piece of paper in his other hand. "I talked to my boss, the assistant chief, 2 times. He said to give you this." He talked in Yank instead of his earlier local. He handed me the scrap of paper with fringe along one side that spoke to its notebook origins. I read the words written in pencil. Walker, 32 King's Cross. "Is this the name of the officer?" I asked. "No. The officer that worked the case drowned 11 months ago," Darren said, his voice black water in a dead calm. He didn't offer any more details. I didn't ask. "I'm sorry to hear that. What about the file? Could I see that?" He glared at me. "It was just a traffic incident." He rubbed the back of his neck with one hand. "We have an accident report. I made you a copy. Maybe the coroner has more." He held out the file, then flipped it open. 1 page. I took it out gingerly, my eyes tracing the names Frank Connell and Heather Connell. I scanned the rest until I got to the name of the responding police officer. Typed neatly, it said, Michael Jacoby. Signed in a cramped forward slant, it said, George Tutine. Jacoby. But not this Jacoby, because this Jacoby, Darren, was very much alive. Walker is a private investigator, the only one on St. Marcos. Tutine says Walker knows everybody he needs to know on the island, and he works for a couple of the biggest businesses here. Maybe he can help you. Jacoby started backing away. But your parents died in a car wreck. There just doesn't seem like there's much for you to find. So there's nobody here I can talk to? An angry fire started in my core and spread. Just Michael, and he's dead. He looked at Ava. Good seeing you. He turned on his heel and was gone. My cheeks and ears flamed. Everything about this rang my alarm bells. I opened my mouth, but Ava held her finger up to her lips. I shut it and clenched my teeth. She motioned with her head toward the exit, then started toward it, calling out to all within earshot, "A pleasant good afternoon to you." A wall of humid heat met me at the door, but I busted through it, fueled by my frustration. 2 officers stepped past us and into the building, and then we were alone. I squinted and dug for my sunglasses. Mindful of their friendship, I dialed my temper down. Ava, I know he's your friend, but doesn't it feel like he stiff-armed me? I know I'm not local, but that felt all wrong. Ava's eyes darted left and right. Shush, Katie. Ting's different here than in the States. I opened the car door and clicked the locks open. We got in. Let me see that report, Ava said. I handed it to her. There wasn't much to see. 1-car accident off a cliff and into the rocks below. Driver and passenger deceased. My parents. Without lifting her eyes from the paper, Ava asked, What make you so sure their death's not an accident? I'm not sure. I'm a big believer in intuition, and it's just a feeling I have from little things that don't make sense. Like how my mom always wore my grandmother's wedding ring, but the police never found it. Not on her and not in her stuff at the hotel. I thought that was odd. Plus, I talked to my parents that night. They'd been to dinner, and they were on their way back to the Peacock Flower. They called me while they were driving. They sounded great. And then they were dead. Shit, my eyes started leaking. Okay. It says here your dad was pretty drunk. Her speech had become more formal, more yank. Yes, that's the other thing that bothers me. My father was a recovered alcoholic. He didn't sound drunk when I was on the phone with him, and I can't picture my mother just standing by letting him drink. Mom had wrangled kindergartners for 20 years, a job she liked to say made wrangling my father a cakewalk. She was 2 parts tender and 2 parts steely resolve. Only the surprise gift of Colin had derailed her plans to become a lawyer. Maybe she didn't know, Ava suggested. Maybe. I don't know. Anything's possible. I made a confession. That's what my brother Colin thinks. He's a police officer. When my parents first died, he called and talked to an officer here. Colin said he was nice, he was helpful, and that he said they see it all the time on St. Marcos. Tourists driving drunk and getting into bad situations. Colin thought maybe Dad had relapsed and was hiding it, the drinking, from my mom. Ava put her hand on my forearm. I hate to say it, Katie, but tourists and drunk drivers are the same thing to us. That didn't help my leaky eyes. But your friend acted so weird, don't you think so? She looked at me, and her eyes were soft and sad. The officer on this case that died, Michael Jacoby, he was Darren's brother, his kid brother. I'm sorry. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm making everything about me. A sharp rap on the window behind my head cut me short. I yelped and jumped in my seat, banging my head into the roof. Ava gasped, too. I turned to see Darren Jacoby's broad face framed in my window. I started to roll it down, but the buttons didn't respond. Only then did I realize that we were sitting in a hot car without the windows down or air conditioner on. I inserted the keys and cranked the engine, then rolled the window down. Ava leaned across me, pure local again. "Jacoby, you scare us good." He didn't smile. "I wanted to tell her," he looked directly at me, "to tell you that I'm sorry about your parents. I know it hard to lose someone you love. I know it make you ask questions. But my brother a good cop, and I trust him. If he said they die in a car accident, that what happened." He had switched back to local speech again. "I'm sorry about your brother," I said. He inclined his head, eyes down, then met mine again. "Good day, Miss Connell." I rolled the window up again as he walked away. I was more confused now than I'd been before I came to the station. It would be best to let it go, to trust Colin's judgment, to look for peace instead of trouble. I knew that. I normally trusted Colin completely, too. But he'd had girl trouble right before Mom and Dad died. His fiancée had dumped him for a woman, and he was just not himself then, distracted with his own stuff. If I had doubts, then I owed it to my parents to do this. I had let them down for a year, letting everything else be more important than my intuition, than them. And as long as a shred of doubt remained in me, I had to keep going. I backed out of my parking spot and put the car in drive.
Chapter 9. Taino, St. Marcos, USVI, March 18th, 2012.
15 minutes later, Ava and I sat in front of the desk of a Mr. Paul Walker at 32 Kings Cross Street. His office was a long, narrow room with walls and floors of red brick. Probably an alley or breezeway once upon a time. It was squeezed in between a thrift store and an abandoned record store that still had dust-covered albums on display and an air of shame about it, a failure. I wondered if there were any treasures hidden in its depths. Probably not. Walker had gone to the back of his space to a mini refrigerator, from which he fetched 2 bottles of water. He used the sleeve of his shirt to wipe down the bottles and tops as he came back across the uneven floor between us. The walls squeezed in behind him, squirting him forward. Or so my eyes told me. It was a house of mirrors at a low-rent carnival in here. "So tell me about the case, Miss Connell," Walker said as he handed the waters across the desk to us, then sat. I'd only worked closely with one other investigator before, Nick. What a contrast Walker was to him. Walker's belly looked about 5 months pregnant under his Crucian rum t-shirt. Sweat was beaded on his forehead. His whole office smelled in need of a shower. If I'd have had a handkerchief with me, I would have held it to my face. After I cleaned my water bottle. I set the bottle down on the floor beside me. My parents were on St. Marcos for a week last year. They came here for their 40th anniversary. They had a great time, and they called me every day. A twinge of guilt shot through me as I remembered the irritation I'd felt at seeing their number on my phone. People I loved, interrupting a life I didn't, and I was irritated with them. They did all the normal tourist things. They took a catamaran out to one of the keys. They hiked in the rainforest. They went to a secluded beach to snorkel. It was like they recaptured their youth here. They even called me one day and said they'd walked up on 2 people having sex on the beach. Literally. My mom giggled like a teenage girl when she told me about it. Some big, bushy-haired blonde man and a tiny black woman, she told me. But she loved it. She loved everything about the trip. Get to the point, Katie. Funny how eloquent I could be about other people's problems, but how awkward about my own. I finished the rest of my story without diving off into irrelevant detail. Walker's eyes lasered my face while I talked. When I finished, he remained silent, slowly tapping his pen against his lips. "Mr. Walker, do you have any questions?" I asked. "Oh, sorry. You remind me of someone I used to know," he said. His comment crawled across my skin like a scorpion. "Yes, just a few questions to help me get started. Before your parents died, where did they have dinner?" I remembered this. They had loved the restaurant and returned to it for their last dinner. "Fortuna's. Do you know of it?" "Yes, it's a very popular place." My eyes strayed to the framed NYPD 10-year service award on the wall over his left shoulder. Beside it hung the obligatory island fishing picture. Walker and an equally large black man and an even larger blond man standing on the stern deck of a boat named Big Kahuna, the three of them together hefting a huge marlin. Ava spoke for the first time since we'd all exchanged greetings at the beginning of the meeting. "Baptiste Bluff not exactly on the way home from the restaurant to the hotel." Walker ignored her and continued speaking to me. "Did they go anywhere else that you know of that last night?" "Not that I know of." "The casino? A moonlight stroll on the beach, perhaps?" "I'm sorry. I just don't know. I have the accident report from the police, though, and they said the coroner might have a report, too." I held out the police file, and he took it, opened it, and set it in front of him. "Okay, I'll get that from the coroner." "Also," I hesitated, looked at Ava, then plowed ahead. "The officer that investigated their deaths died shortly after them. You can see on the report that a different officer signed it than the one who investigated. I don't know if that means anything, but—" Walker cut me off. "I'll look into it. All right." He glanced down at the opened file and the police report on his desk. "I think I have everything I need from you. There's a $500 retainer to get started." I needed to do this, but was just writing this man a check and trusting him to look into it enough? Would spending the insurance money I hadn't needed make me feel less guilty? I wanted to call Nick and ask his advice. I wanted to run out the front door. I wanted a rum punch. I wanted Mom and Dad back. I swallowed hard and pulled out my checkbook. As I wrote him a check, he continued to talk. "My caseload is very heavy right now. I know I can't get to this for a few weeks. It's not an emergency after all, as your parents are already dead." Another skin-crawling moment. He was right, though. Crass, but right. I set the check on the desk with my business card on top of it and used my fingertips to push them across to him. They dug a trail of clean through the dust on his desk. "Well, thank you, Miss Connell. I'll be in touch," he said, grabbing the check before my fingertips left it. As Ava and I stood up to depart, he said, "Oh, one last thing. It's better for me if I talk to the potential witnesses fresh. It interferes with my investigation when my client tries to do it first herself. So if you please, let me do what you have hired me to do, and you enjoy the rest of your stay on our lovely island." "Fine," I said, and we left as fast as I could get out of there. Chapter 10. Taino, St. Marcos, USVI, March 18th, 2012. Ava and I traipsed down the sidewalk, silent as an old married couple instead of two women who had known each other for 15 hours. I still walked ahead of her, but I was slowing down. From life, though, not from Lyman. When we reached the car, Ava put both her palms flat on the roof. "Tell me you hungry and ready for a cocktail." She brought one forearm in front of her face and looked at an imaginary watch. Yup, definitely time for a late lunch. I need to see Baptiste's bluff, I said. I just need to see it. I don't think I can turn this over to Walker and let it go without seeing it for myself. Ava struck a stage pose, putting her bent arms in the air, all 10 fingers pointing to the sky, and gestured from her shoulder in a rhythmic emphasis. Well, of course you need to see it. She dropped her dramatic stance and leaned toward me. And I take you, but you gonna have a flying fish sandwich in one hand and a red stripe in the other when we get there. She pointed to a street ahead and to the left. Drive, and go that way. After we got back into the hot Malibu, we drove out of town along the winding north shore. Blue on our right, green on our left. We rolled the windows down and let our hair blow. I needed a hurricane to blow my storm system out and into the sea air, but a strong coastal breeze would do for now. We passed a marina. The smell of diesel and dead fish were overwhelming for a moment, and I exhaled through my nose. I pulled some of the hair out of my mouth that the wind had blown in and took a sip from the water bottle I'd brought from Walker's office. The same bottle I had given a punishing rub-down with a Sani wipe from my purse once we'd gotten into the car. After 10 minutes of driving, Ava pointed to a hut on the beach. Pull over there, she said. The hut turned out to be a small takeout restaurant with a bar and some beach stools. There was no name on it that I could see. Ava slipped off her/my shoes and got out of the car, so I followed suit. We crossed the sand to the nameless hut and were greeted by a couple of dogs. Coconut retrievers, Ava said. She commanded them to get back in a deeper voice than I'd heard her use before, and the dogs obliged, tails wagging. Ava hailed up the proprietor like an old friend and gave him our order. He stuck out his palm, so I pulled out a 20. His eyes twinkled, and he held out his other palm. I pulled out a second 20. He nodded, and I placed 120 in each. He put the money under the counter in a basket and turned back to his fryers, sucking his cheeks into the space where his teeth used to be. No change. Paradise wasn't cheap. Ava hopped onto one of the bar stools and faced the sea. I joined her. What a way to grab lunch. I could get used to this. I tucked my feet up onto the support bar around the stool's legs and put my elbows on my knees, facing my palms. Lunch always so expensive on this island? I asked. Yeah, man, if you're not Banya. I was indignant. So he would have charged you less than what he charged me? She snorted. No, he a thief, but usually they're a local discount. Oh well, it wasn't surprising. I rolled my head, enjoying a few more neck cracks. The water was calling to me. Do you mind if I put my toes in while we wait? I asked Ava. Go ahead. I stay here and call you when our food come out. The sand was warm, almost hot. My feet sank in heel first, slowing me down. As I got closer to the waterline, the sand grew firmer and cooler. I didn't hesitate. I plunged into the water, ankle deep, then knee deep. I pulled the hem of my white sundress up several inches. The water surged against my knees, then rose over them and wetted my thighs. Then it rushed out past my legs again, and I felt the breeze move in to dry me off. I could see my toes on the white sandy ocean floor, and I wiggled them. The water came back, lifting me up as it rose. A school of small silver fish darted around me, half on one side of me and half on the other, only inches below the surface. Katie, Ava called. Food ready. I could have stood there for hours, but I walked out of the water, splashing it up with my toes on my last few steps, imagining my mother, wondering if she'd done the same, if she'd done it right here on this beach, if the old man in the hut looking out at me now had seen her, and from a distance thought I looked familiar to him. Since my teens, people had claimed we could pass for twins. Mom would roll her eyes and say, From 100 yards to a myopic septuagenarian. She was wrong, though. She was far too young to die. I rejoined Ava, and we carried our greasy, wax paper-wrapped sandwiches and Johnny cakes back to the car. Johnny cake is deep-fried bread, the Caribbean equivalent of biscuits to Southerners or sopapillas to Mexicans. Just what my cellulite needed. Except that really, it was lack of exercise in the last 5 years since I'd quit karate. Not too many calories. That was my problem. Ava also had 2 icy red stripes between her fingers. How much further? I asked. 10 minutes, she said. We drove another mile along the water, then turned straight inland and upward. I hated leaving the serenity of the shoreline. The last 8 minutes of our drive were on rutted dirt roads that shot off into dense bushes every few hundred yards. Not a place to explore by yourself, Ava said, pointing at one of the side roads. Too isolated. It's gorgeous up here, though, I said. In fact, I was shocked at how gorgeous it was. Different from the water, obviously, but different in a good way, a way that was perfect. The trees were taller and met above the road, creating a roof above us and dampening the noise of the surf against sand and rocks only a mile away. I saw a bright flash of feathers in one of the trees. Is that a macaw? Yeah, man. They live up here. I didn't know if I could ever be as blasé about this flora and fauna as Ava sounded. I soaked it in. Orchids more beautiful than hothouse flowers, trailing vines of hot pink. Pink and orange flamboyance, standing tall and proud, reminding me of the mimosa trees back home. Turn in here, Ava said, and I made a sharp right, back in the general direction of the water, but hundreds of feet above it now. We drove a quarter of a mile, then broke out of the trees. The change in our surroundings was sudden, a ripping away of the quietude of the forest. My mood shifted with it. Who was I kidding? My emotions were raw, and my moods were moving up and down the scales faster than Sarah Brightman in Phantom of the Opera. You can park anywhere, she said. I pulled to a stop and parked, then shut off the engine and held my breath. Coming to the place where my parents died was like walking into the painted churches of the Navidad Valley. Our family visited them on a short road trip to LaGrange when I was in middle school. In those old wooden churches, I knew I was in the presence of something holy and powerful, and that under their roofs, hardship and blessings walked hand in hand, just as they did here, where the rainforest met the cliffs, where life met death. Ava was already outside, barefoot again, and walking up a rise. I trailed behind her. I wanted to take it all in. I wanted to feel my parents again, and I wanted them to know I had come here, that they had mattered to me. That if I accomplished nothing else on this trip, I would at least say goodbye. I love you, Mom and Dad, I whispered. Ava crested the hill and in 3 steps had disappeared. I sped up. As I came over the ridge, I gasped and stepped backward from the sudden vertigo. The ground sloped away for 30 yards and then simply vanished. Beyond was nothing but sky until it merged with the Caribbean Sea in the distance. "Dey not the first to drive off dis bluff," Ava said, and she was solemn. "Oh, my God," I said, because I couldn't think of any other words. I sank to the grass. I perched myself on a hummock and tried to gather my thoughts. Why? Why had they come here? Dis place kind of our lover's lane, in a rugged and inaccessible way. A lot of girls I know lost their virginity out here. It also been the site of a few lovers' leaps. It always had this romantic allure people can't resist. I mulled over her words. Was it possible my parents had sought this spot out? A last tryst on their anniversary getaway? I pictured the 2 of them holding hands, heads touching. I hope so. Something in me didn't believe it, but God, I hoped so. "Goodbye, Mom and Dad," I whispered. I closed my eyes again, counted from 100 backwards, tried to think of nothing, and offered my heart to the sky.